Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Salvaje. Here are the best swords in Fortnite Save the World as of early 2019. My supporter creator code is Salvaje, and if you guys want to rock that would be highly appreciated. Keep in mind that I will not be judging these swords based on their individual performance and damage numbers alone. I will be reviewing these swords based on the flexibility that they bring into the table, how well they perform in a team-based environment with traps, gadgets, and abilities involved. And of course, it's also all about the utility that the sword brings into the table and also the versatility. In other words, how can the sword adapt to specific situations and how the sword handles specific situations. With all of that said, let's get straight into the video, and keep in mind the swords aren't in any specific order. All of these swords are outstanding. Starting off at number 1, we have the Founder's Flaming Masamune. At the time of me making this video, you can only get the sword if you bought the limited Founders Edition of Fortnite Save the World, or if you buy the Ultimate Founders Edition of Fortnite Save the World. So the Flaming Masamune is a really great sword overall because it's really flexible with the perks. You can go for a crit rating critical damage build, and the sword is going to be able to provide some pretty decent damage. On top of all that, every 6th swing, the sword is going to be causing an area of effect explosion in your body, which means that if you're surrounded by a lot of husk, the husk are going to get damaged. And if you go for a critical rating critical damage build, the sword is going to be able to have some pretty decent damage, which means that the area of effect explosion around you is going to be really powerful. On top of all that, you can also go for a triple attack speed Flaming Masamune, which means that you're going to be triggering the 6th perk of this weapon very often, which means you're going to be able to delete a lot of husks that are right in front of you very quickly. Now, there's one big weakness that this sword has. The sword is always locked into the fire element, which means that it's going to underperform when you're using the sword against water husk. However, that's not really much of a problem if you have the sword on full legendary perks, and even if you have a triple attack speed Flaming Masamune, the amount of DPS that this sword brings into the table just makes it really good, even when you're using it against water husk. And that's why I had to put the Founder's Flaming Masamune on my best swords of Save the World, at least of course as of early 2019. Next on the list is the Guardian's Will. That's right, the Guardian's Will is on this list, and the reason why I say that is because a lot of people think heavy swords in Fortnite Save the World are completely terrible. You see, to a casual Save the World player, a slow swing speed on a sword means that the sword is bad, and sadly that's also the case with a lot of Save the World YouTubers. Well, I'm here to tell you guys that's actually a lot of misinformation. Despite the fact that the Guardian's Will has a really slow swing speed, that huge weakness that the sword has, it's actually covered by the massive amount of damage that this sword can bring to the table. This sword can literally 1-slice or 2-slice basic husk without you having to use a sword based character. You see, a lot of these best swords, if you use it with a sword related character like Swordmaster Ken for example, they're going to be performing really well at an above average level. But the Guardian's Will, if you don't use it with a sword based character like for example Jingle Jess, you're actually going to be able to get some pretty decent performance out of this sword. And I'm pretty sure you guys can tell by now why this sword is on this list, because if you do use this sword with a character that specializes on melee, well, this sword is going to be able to dish out some massive amounts of damage. It's going to be basically deleting basic husk, and when it comes down to mist monsters and husky husk, this sword is also going to be able to delete them very quickly. Another thing that the Guardian's Will has going for it is the secondary attack, which is basically a leap attack. If you use this attack on blasters, the blasters are going to get staggered and you're going to be able to get at least 1 or 2 slices in until of course the husk actually damages you. And this is of course very helpful if you are going against husky husk, because sometimes you stagger them in spot and you basically get a free hit off of them. And guys, this is why the Guardian's Will is a pretty decent sword, because it has things that basically make up for its weakness, and of course that weakness is the slow swing speed. Now, I just want to point out, originally I wasn't going to put the Guardian's Will on this list, but I realized that if I didn't put the Guardian's Will on this list, I wasn't going to let the viewer know which was the best heavy sword in the entire game, at least as of early 2019 of course. So that's why I ended up putting the Guardian's Will on this list. However, an honorable mention for a really good heavy sword is also the Tree of Light. That's right, despite the negative reviews that it got, the Tree of Light can sometimes hit smashers for up to 100,000 damage. Do not underestimate the Tree of Light. Anyways, like I said, all of the swords on this list are actually exceptional, but there is one sword on this list that outperforms every single sword in the game, at least as of early 2019, and that is the Spectral Blade. The only weakness that the Spectral Blade has is that it can only have the physical, energy, and water elements, and it can't have the fire and nature element. However, that is completely irrelevant because this sword has the best overall damage in the game compared to Stabsworth III, and the truth is, even though Stabsworth III can do more damage to Water Husk, for example, because it can have the nature element, however, despite that fact, the Stabsworth III can still not compete with the Spectral Blade because the Spectral Blade has one thing that the Stabsworth III doesn't have, and that is massive utility and the ability to adapt to multiple situations. And that is because of the secondary attack that the Spectral Blade has, Spectral Warp. And basically this is an attack that lets you sort of launch or sort of teleport to enemies that are nearby. And the reason why this attack is so good is because it's able to take out a huge amount of basic husks that are in front of you very easily. And it will instantly delete all of this basic husk if you're using, of course, a sword related character, like for example Swordmaster Ken. On top of all that, the utility that Spectral Warp brings into the table when it comes down to the Spectral Blade gives you the ability to go from one target to the next, or also close the distance between your target and of course you. And basically this is going to mean that you're going to be able to apply more damage more very quickly to of course targets that are a threat. And that simple fact is why I do believe that the Spectral Blade is the best sword overall in Fortnite Save the World. But wait, there's more. I still have more to say about the Spectral Blade. It is a sword that is able to dish out great amount of consistent overall damage without using a sword-based character. However, if you were to use a sword-based character with this sword, every single husk that stands in front of your way is going to get instantly deleted. And if you don't believe me, of course, feel free to check out my overpowered damage Swordmaster Ken 130 Spectral Blade gameplay, which is very nasty, and a couple of showers might be needed after you watch that video. Anyways, on top of all that, the Spectral Blade is also one of the best swords in Fortnite Save the World because it just has flexibility when it comes down to the perks. If you just want an attack speed build, you can go for it. But in my opinion, and from my testing, the best build that is going to give you some great consistent critical damage and some great overall damage in general is attack speed, critical rating, critical damage, and damage. Run those perks with the Spectral Blade and you're going to be destroying everything in your path. Anyways, last but not least, another exceptional sword in Fortnite Save the World is the Stabsworth III. I simply have to put this weapon on this list because it is still a great sword. In my opinion, it will never surpass the Spectral Blade because it just doesn't have the utility that the Spectral Blade brings into the table. And yes, it's true, you can put the nature element and you can also put the fire element on Stabsworth III. However, that small strength that the Stabsworth III has, the Spectral Blade sort of makes up for it with, of course, the Spectral Warp attack. However, I still don't want to take anything away from the Stabsworth III. It is a great sword, and if you don't have the Spectral Blade, make sure that you get the Stabsworth III. If you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to drop it a like. Those are the best swords in Fortnite Save the World as of early 2019. And if you want more in-depth quality content for Fortnite Save the World, feel free to subscribe. And also feel free to check out my Anthem videos on the channel as well if you are an Anthem player.